My Dear Motivation Spotlight. Every week, bringing you an inspiring Israeli guest making a difference in Israel. Wow, do I have a story for you today? Today's guest is someone who has a story that is something like you see in the movies, not something that we hear from people's everyday story. Who is our guest today? Claire Blumenthal, or Claire Blumenthal Zeitler, as she's known today, who is the founder of the Pemberley Group and Blumenthal Magazine. And after building and running a media company and publication in Dubai, Claire made aliyah to Israel in May 2024, where she increasingly focuses her work on culture, identity, home, community, and the beauty of a life grounded in Torah values. Her life was not always about that, as you'll hear in our podcast. Claire discovered after being adopted many years later, at the age of 21, that she had an Arab father and her mother was not Jewish. So sit back and we'll take you through the story, the unbelievably interesting story of Claire and her life. So Claire, thank you so much for being our guest today. You really have a wow story, and I'm going to be hearing a lot of it now. Some of it I've just heard little bits and pieces. Please share with us, with our viewers, the fascinating story of Claire, now since making aliyah, but of course the interesting part, which was from before you made aliyah, and about this fascinating life, which you mentioned that you have a book about.
Thank you so much. I have a very interesting background that led me to my business in Dubai. And I found out when I was 21 that I have an Arabic father, which led me, after living an entirely religious life, having a identity crisis and living with Arabs in many places, East Jerusalem and Yafo, and then Sinai, and then Dubai. So
wow, hang on. You said you found out at age 21. Up until 21, you did not know who your father was?
correct, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that.
I was adopted and my parents were Bali Tshuva, and I was raised in a regular Hebrew day school and then at Beis Yaakov High School. And then I went to seminary like every other American. And then I got married to a chassid. So that also took me on a little journey. And then after 6 years of being married to him, I left and came back to Israel, where my father then a couple of months later passed away. And then I felt completely lost and didn't know where to turn or who I was really without him being there as my constant stone. And I had an identity crisis for 10 years and decided that I was trying to connect to something, but I didn't know what. So I just went into the old city and started talking to people. And that's really how it all started.
Wow, that's incredible. As a child, did you know that? Or what age did you know that you're adopted?
Always. My mother used to light candles Friday night, sit me down and tell me how much she loved me and tell me that I wasn't born from her tummy. I was born from her heart.
Wow, that's a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah, it really is beautiful. My parents are exceptional people, very giving. And so you can imagine the loss that I felt when my father passed away. I just couldn't handle it. At that time, I was a columnist for one of the Jewish magazines, and I completely just dropped off the map. They gave my column to somebody else. It was terrible. So I was always religious at that point. But then when I'm now newly single and divorced, and everyone's looking at me like used goods, it was not pretty. And just finding a place for Shabbat every single week and having to beg your way into things, it wasn't nice. So I just decided I'm not going to do this anymore. And I'm going to go where people want me and where I'm actually invited to meals. And so
Which
that's
was
really where I was invited many Arab homes. They all wanted to get to know me and learn about me. And they all thought I was fascinating. And because they weren't looking at me as a Jew, they were looking at me as an Arab who just happened to grow up in America. So I didn't speak Arabic, but I would introduce myself with an Arabic name.
wow.
I
So
used
you're
to,
saying you actually took on a different name and you
yep,
took on a whole new identity.
yep.
So who and how did you connect with? Did you connect with your original biological father? You managed to locate your roots back to him?
I had connected with his daughter, so my half sister, on Facebook. And I said to her, I think that I share a father with you. And she went to him. And of course, he denied it because it meant that he was cheating on his wife. And then later he came back to her and said, you know what? It's really true.
And I'd like
And
to meet her.
so I started talking to her in 2020. 2012, 2013. In 2015, I finally met them. His son got married and I was invited to the wedding. And it was so sweet that everybody was just acting as if I was a sister and I was part of the family. And I even asked his wife, "You must hate me. My existence must hurt you so much." And she said, "How can I hate somebody who looks so much like my own children?" And we
Wow.
really are.
And is there a resemblance when you looked at your, let's call them
I
step siblings, you actually saw that you looked alike?
I have one half sister who we are identical. Really. It's very.
Wow, that is crazy. Do you still have contact with them today?
We have the one that has space bucks. Every time there's a war, she'll say, "I hope you're safe."
Where do they live?
They live in Wisconsin.
Ah, okay, they're in the US.
They're in the US.
Aha, okay, that's so interesting. Is your mom still alive? Did you ever have these conversations with her?
Met her after my father's Shiva. We invited her to the house, and that was the first time I met her.
So
Okay.
you found your biological father, your biological mother. Let's just talk about that. So when did you discover her?
She was the one who found me. So she actually, it's funny, she bribed somebody at the adoption agency and found out my last name and found my father because she was able to choose who adopted me. So she was given 3 files and she chose my family because A, they were Jewish, B, I would have morals, B, because my father was a doctor, so I'm going to be educated and taken care of, and C, that I was close by, apparently. So those were her motivating factors for choosing my family. And so when she bribed somebody at the adoption agency to find out my last name, she already knew that my father was a doctor. So all she had to do was look at a phone book for a Dr. Blumenthal. And there were 2 in the state. And she made appointments at both places to see if there were any pictures of me hanging in the office.
Ah, so she went to these doctors as if she was a patient, but was actually looking to get more information.
Yeah.
And she actually approached them about it. She spoke to them about it in the appointment.
She actually ended up canceling the appointments because she was so scared. So she never actually went. So the way that she actually found me was I was 21. So it was 2007-ish. And she found me via my engagement announcement on Ole Simchas. It was a big website back then. And so it said that my Hebrew name and then Blumenthal and then from Indiana. And she put 2 and 2 together and logged in through the whole site and sent me a message saying, "Hey, I think you're my daughter." And
Well, how does one feel when you open up a message like that?
I was in shock. I remember I opened the email at my in-laws' dining room table, and they are hardcore Hasidic. And you could just imagine I'm sitting here with all these Hasidim, and then that she's telling me this. I was just in shock. I didn't know what to do with it. And that's why it took me so long to actually want to talk to her or talk to him or find out anything because I was very much entrenched in the world that I was living in. I was trying to
Right.
find a place within the Hasidic world. So I
Right.
wasn't.
That is also just opening up your email while you're in this house sitting around the table. That's also unusual.
Yeah.
But imagine, how do you hold back your surprise or your shock when you're sitting with these people? And did you share it with them? You kept it to yourself?
I did share, and my then mother-in-law said, "You're not allowed to tell anybody that your father is an Arab or anything like this." I was already the black sheep. It was
Wow,
all.
that's crazy. So look, I know in the Hasidic world, they check you up very carefully beforehand. So they were okay with you being adopted, even though they didn't know exactly where you came from. Let's call it that.
No, they did not. They were not a fan of my marriage, but they didn't really have a choice. I met my husband on the street. I met him in Meish Aram. He had a fast car. I got in the car, and we were engaged a week later.
Wow, tell us a little bit about that.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the culture in Meish Aram, but after the buses stop, Meish Aram is basically an empty street. There's no cars in Geula and Meish Aram. So the guys would drag race down the street when they're
Okay, so
in.
I'm not familiar with that aspect of Masharim. Now, I knew your story was fascinating, but it's even more fascinating than what I anticipated.
Yes, I was on a date with another Chassid, a guy from Borough Park, and our date ended 3 a.m. And I said, I want to go back to my apartment. I was living in Harnov, but the buses didn't start until 5 a.m. And I didn't have any money for a cab, and neither did he. So he said, let me call my friend. And he called his friend, and his friend had a car. And that was my husband.
And you landed up marrying the friend. I guess they say nothing's the big way, right? Nothing's by chance.
Nothing.
Wow. Okay. This is fascinating. So you say you still had contact with them up until today. And at least, I guess, did it help you with identity crisis that you knew that your mother was Jewish? That at least according to religion that you were Jewish?
She's Native American.
She's Native American, but she's Jewish.
No.
Oh, she's not Jewish. Okay. She wanted you to be adopted by a Jewish couple, but she wasn't Jewish. So you had to go through conversion as well at some stage?
Yes. Yes.
I think they should definitely make a movie about your story. It's a fascinating story.
Working on it.
You are?
Yeah.
It's really something out of the ordinary that most people do not have in their background.
Yes.
How was it adapting over the years? You said you had this identity crisis. You became involved with the Arab families. You mentioned also, if you'd like to talk about it, you mentioned something about Israel even deporting you. Was it because of your contact with the Arab world?
So I was living in Yafo at one point, which is already red flag. And then I would be going down to Sinai for just the weekends. It started off as a 1 month period. And then after that, I became so in love with it that I went every single weekend after that for months. And so when they asked me, wait, what were you doing there? Every single time it seemed like I had a different story because I would edit my life stories so that it didn't look suspicious. But every time I changed it, it looked more suspicious. So I was just trying to explain to them who I was, and it just never worked. And then eventually I do realize that I became a target to be questioned and detained and strip searched and the whole thing because they thought that it would make sense. I'm either laundering money or I'm a drug mule. And so that's really where it all came down to. And then they caught me because I one time overstayed a tourist visa. And that is what they got me on. And then finally they said, you're not allowed in. And I said, I have to go in. I have a relationship. I was living in a lot then. And I had a relationship with a Moroccan Israeli. And I said, I need to go home to go get my stuff. I can't just not ever come back. And so they let me in for a few days, for 5 days. And I was so depressed. I had no idea what was going on. And we went to the Misrata Panim with my boyfriend who spoke Hebrew. And he said, no, we're not taking your deal. We're going to America because he wanted to go to America. So he got me deported instead of me. I could have made aliyah right then and there, which I should have. But God put him in my life for that reason. And I needed to go to America and have unfinished business. So that's what it was there for.
Wow. It's just a wow. That's the only word that I can use.
Yeah.
What goes through your mind all these years when you were feeling this being unsettled and this identity crisis? Like, it's not something that most of us can imagine. What goes through your mind? Do you remember all the feelings you experienced at the time?
Honestly, there's so much that I've blocked out. For sure, my first marriage, I've completely blocked out. I don't remember a thing. You could ask me how I feel. I have no idea. But I do remember parts of the identity crisis. And I honestly wasn't that long ago. October 7th changed that a lot, but we'll get to that. I was very much in the mode of I'm going to keep moving. I lived in hotels. I lived on the street. I lived everywhere I could as long as to make myself available to whatever options came my way. I didn't want to be weighed down by 1 year lease. Then I have to stay here. I wanted to be available to whatever life threw me and be able to take chances. And so I would get a room for a week, 2 weeks, and then that would be it. And then I would move on to the next place, the next adventure. But realizing now that was a terrible thing. And I should have been more stable because stable looked better because I looked like a spy to a lot of people. I've been called a spy by Jordanians, by Saudis, and by a lot of people. They don't trust me. I would go to Arab countries and I would tell them a little bit about my life, and they'd be like, no, we're not having a conversation because someone is listening to you.
This Yes, and you can't blame them for thinking this because the stories just sound so surreal. It sounds so unrealistic. Who can have a story like this?
So nobody really trusted me. And I had one person, I know that the Egyptian police questioned every single person that I came into contact with in Egypt. But there was one person who I had a very special relationship with. He was like my brother. And they brought him in for questioning. And they just didn't understand why he would have such a close relationship with a white woman who he wasn't trying to date. And he just said, we have this bond that I can't explain, but I will do anything for her and she'll do anything for me. And that's how we handled living in Egypt. It was really that. He had my back at every turn and I needed it.
Wow. So do you visit in these days, like this period, do you go to any of these countries or you put a cut to that part of your life and you're in contact only with Israel and say the US? And I do want to talk about Dubai as well, because you ran for many years of business in Dubai. So do you have contact with the UAE countries or any other Arab countries?
Dubai, for sure. I definitely have contacts in Dubai. After October 7th, it was really all of the contacts that I had before October 7th disappeared.
They disappeared the contacts because they were now anti-Israel?
So October 7th happened, my Instagram spewing just pro Kahana kind of a rhetoric. And you can imagine it didn't come across so well with people from Arab countries and doing business with Arabs. It looked very angry, my Instagram. Every single day, people would start unfollowing, and I lost hundreds of followers from Dubai, 100%.
How did it affect your company? Because your company was being run from Dubai during this time?
So at that time, there was no company in Dubai. I created the company in 2017, and then it ran until 2021.
And this was in the US, correct?
No, in the UAE, in Dubai.
In the UAE, okay.
And then in 2021, my business kind of imploded because of COVID, and I was supposed to sell it. And then COVID happened, and that sale did not go through. My main situation was making events, collaborations with other companies, and that was completely over when you can only have 10 people in a room. But that was one of those things that God was saying, you need to get out of here. And so I took the hint and I left. I went back to the States at that point.
So you closed your company then, or you went back to the States and reignited it there in the US?
No, I completely closed it. I closed it until I went back in 2022.
You went back to Dubai?
Israel had closed borders until November 2nd of 2021. So I was on that first plane out of New York back to Israel. And I was trying to work from my apartment in Jerusalem. And I knew I needed to go back to Dubai to continue working. And then I actually did go back to Dubai in March of 2022. And then it started gaining traction again a little bit. And then it kind of just fell off again because I was in an abusive relationship with the Israeli Moroccan.
You haven't had an easy life, to put it bluntly. You've had what could be considered an understatement, a difficult life, but I've no doubt that it's given you the strength and created the character and the characteristics that you embody today. How would you see it?
100%. Definitely the words used to describe me are resilient and positive. I am always just trying to find the little things in life to make me happy. A flower, a sunset, whatever it is, I'll take it. As long as I can see the positive in it.
That's superb and that's very admirable as well. So share with our viewers about what you do, what the Pemberley Group is, and you more recently started also Blumenthal Magazine.
Yes. So the Pemberley Group started as a magazine, a digital magazine for men. I was coming from a place of I didn't know really what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to write. Writing was 100%. I know I'm good at. I didn't have any qualms about it. So I was just, okay, fine. So I'll write. So I started the magazine and I did it for men. And it's a lot easier to write for men than it is for women. Women have a lot going on and men are much more simpler creatures.
Still, you say that because I would think for women that there's just so much more that we could cover, so many more topics that women are interested in.
That's the problem. I don't want to have an overwhelming amount of things on my head. I want to know what a niche. This is my niche. So we did specifically elegant lifestyle. So we were doing cigars, whiskeys, bespoke suits, call back to etiquette, really. Then we started taking on clients who were happy with our work for PR and events, and that kind of snowballed into an amazing thing. And then I found out that I am obsessed with fabrics. And so I started designing dresses for women that were custom made.
You mean it was a passion and a hobby that's turned into actually part of your profession?
Yes, exactly. I remember speaking to a girl I worked with, and she's "You're spending an awful lot of time in fabric stores lately. Maybe you should be relooking, rejudging where you want to be spending your time." And I said, "No, I like this, but I'm also going to do this. We're not going to just pivot. We're going to do everything." So I started doing dress orders for women in Dubai. And then that pivoted to men's suits because already was focusing on men's suiting.
And is all this while you're still running the Pemberley group and the publishing at the same time?
Yeah. Every once.
Okay.
Being busy is being fulfilled in my eyes. So then after all of this became one, I then moved back to the States, and that part of everything took a moment. And while I was in the States, I opened Pemberley Maison, which was an offshoot of what I had been doing prior when I was living in Tel Aviv. And we did decorating, we did organizing, we did property management, anything you need for your house, a full on concierge, which was also taking another hobby that I had growing up, an interest that I had in homes. So I just wanted everyone to walk into their vacation apartment and everything was settled for them. One of my dreams is to open a hotel one day. So I'm just practicing.
Oh, wow. Cool, cool. So we're not just sticking with publishing, you've still got these wide dreams. Okay. Talk about niching. That's not exactly niching.
This is how it became a group.
Okay. So what are the different aspects that the group include now?
So now the entire group is media, publishing. We've closed Pemberley Maison. That is no longer happening. Now my husband has opened up his own recruiting company, so we've added that into the mix. And we have Blumenthal magazine, so that's also the publishing. Now I'm writing my book, and it's starting with the speaking engagements now, and it's turned out to be a lot of fun. To be able to engage with people in person is really magnificent.
So tell me, for many years, did you try to hide this identity and hide everything? And now you feel it's like time to actually come out and share with the world about your background, who Claire is?
I have always been extremely loud and extremely vocal, and I don't like to participate in conversations where I have to quiet myself. That's not who I am.
That's not who you are. But your friends in your neighborhood and the years growing up, did they know about your background? Or is it now that you find that you want to talk about it?
They knew about my background. It just wasn't a priority to be spoken about. It was always just, okay, Claire's adopted. It wasn't anything interesting.
And listen, there are many adopted people in the world. It doesn't have to be a big deal.
Exactly.
That in your adult life, when you found out more than just Claire's adopted, when you found out about the whole Arab addition to your family?
When the Arab thing came to light, I was still very much entrenched in the Hasidic world, so I wasn't really saying anything because it didn't matter to me. I knew who I was, I knew where I was, and I didn't need to even consider it. So I always thought I shared DNA with these people. And so that's really what got me to the October 7th. I really was having my own crisis, obviously national grief and all of this, but in my own world, I was thinking, oh my God, I'm related to these people. And it took me 2 weeks to really come to the realization that I'm not related to evil incarnate. And I was in a very deep, dark place at that point until I reached that knowledge of understanding.
I'd like to say I can imagine that, but I don't think that any of us can actually imagine what must have gone through your mind during those times.
Yeah, it was extremely hard. It was a shock to everybody, obviously, but to myself, it was the end of times. I didn't understand anything. No one understood anything. Everything was so up in the air, and no one had any idea what was going on.
So what's interesting now, you're saying now your Arab side of the family, they all live in the US, or are there any that live in Israel or in this area?
So they're not Palestinian. They're not from the Levant. They are originally from Bahrain. So from being from Bahrain, they already have an understanding that everyone's just equal. It's a very understanding country. I went to Bahrain and met cousins there, and I said, "How do you feel about me being Jewish?" And they said, "It's okay. We have Sunni, we have Christian, now we have Jewish."
That's an interesting
They took it
aspect.
fine.
And then did you tell them that you converted, or did they think that you were born Jewish? Did that matter to them, or that didn't matter to them?
So that I was converted. They understood. You have to understand, my biological grandfather came to America in the 50s. His father had 4 wives. And so there are cousins literally all over the world that share the same last name as them, as me. So I can go anywhere, say my last name, and people know my family somewhere. And that is just insane. But it also opens up your world a little bit to say, okay, we have cousins in London, we have cousins in Germany, we have cousins in Uganda, we have cousins in America. We're all family. And I think that helped a little.
It's so interesting. And it must have actually opened up a lot of doors for you in certain countries too.
For sure.
Today, do you try and still utilize those connections to open doors, or are you firmly on the Jewish camp, or you still feel like a bit in both worlds?
It's funny. I actually went into the old city in Jerusalem yesterday, and I did use the Arab card, even though I was wearing a mitpacha, and I'm clearly an Orthodox Jew. I feel like I want to make them feel comfortable around me, and with the knowledge that, like, okay, I get you. It's okay. You can be yourself. So I use it mostly for that, not for business.
Before we end off, how can people reach you? Where do you see yourself in terms of your vision moving forward with your company?
Right now, my main focus is writing the book and getting more speaking engagements. So I would really love to connect to different communities of all sorts, not just religious, because I really have an interesting story to share on so many different levels.
And you speak in English as well as Hebrew, or English?
English. My Hebrew is not that great.
Okay, amazing. Claire, thank you for sharing this super fascinating story of yours, the story of your life. And I look forward to reading your book once it's published, as will, I'm sure, many others. How can people reach you? Email, website?
Sure. I'm always available at my Instagram is Claire of Pemberley. Pretty easy to find. The Pemberley group is also on Instagram. All of my things are on Instagram. Email is hello@thepemberleygroup.com. And I'm sure we'll spell it somewhere because people often misspell Pemberley.
It's Pemberley. Thank you to our viewers for watching another episode of the Monday Motivation Spotlight. I'm Lesley Kaplan. Thank you as always to our sponsors, to Eggert & Cohn Insurance and to Lali's Flower Boutique in Jerusalem. And we will see you next week on the Monday Motivation Spotlight. Bye-bye.